imagine finding this really old, dusty blueprint from the 1960s.
Okay.
And it looks like a schematic for some strange, overwhelming machine, right? So you unfold it, you study the lines, the pressure points, the exhaust valves, and suddenly you realize, wait, it's not a machine at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's actually a map of your own brain right now as you're like scrolling through your feed.
That is, yeah, it's basically the architecture of modern exhaustion, the blueprint of a world where everything is trying to persuade you and nothing is entirely certain.
Exactly. And that architecture of modern exhaustion was perfectly mapped out 60 years ago by a guy with an acoustic guitar. Today, we are tearing apart Bob Dylan's 1965 masterpiece, It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Pleading, from the album Bringing It All Back Home.
Such a massive cultural touchstone.
Right. But we're looking at a really fascinating stack of materials today, actually. We've got analytical breakdowns of the song, historical release notes from Dylan's official site, and to bridge the gap to today, we have these surprisingly modern policy reports from the OECD, the FTC, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Yeah, the NIST reports are huge here.
Completely. So our mission today isn't just, a music history deep dive. We are really trying to uncover how this single 60-year-old acoustic song acts as a precise diagnostic map for today's social exhaustion, algorithmic culture, and just general information overload.
And we really need to set the tone right up front for you listening. This isn't just about a singer-songwriter from the 1960s. It's about your daily reality right now.
Yeah, your everyday life.
Exactly. And we are going to examine systems of power, persuasion, and political grouping impartially. We're not taking political sides here, and neither does the structural critique we're analyzing in the sources.
Right. Very important distinction.
Yeah, we're looking strictly at the human mechanics of how public language becomes coercive and how you navigate a world where the idea of objective certainty has basically collapsed.
Man, it's heavy, but so necessary. So let's just jump in. To understand how a song from the 60s diagnoses our modern digital headache, we first have to, understand the radical shift in how this song was written.
Right.
Because 1965 was a massive turning point for Dylan. Before this, he was largely writing what was known as event-centered protest.
Yes. Earlier in his career, he wrote highly topical songs, like songs about specific identifiable injustices, particular court cases, or localized events. The bad guy was always obvious.
Right, like pointing a finger at a specific politician.
Exactly. But with It's All Right, Ma, the scale completely changes. The target becomes diffuse. He shifts from pointing at a specific event to offering this systemic and psychological critique.
Which is a huge leap.
It really is. Politics suddenly becomes braided with metaphysics, with social criticism, and with this deep, pervasive, existential unease. He's no longer just pointing at a bad leader. He's pointing at the entire architecture of modern rhetoric, status systems, and group conformity.
And the way he executes this is through a concept that absolutely blew my mind when I was reading through the analysis. It's called aphorism as weapon.
Such a great term.
It really is, because he writes in these incredibly compact, dense bursts of imagery and moral judgment. And these lines act like, and I love this phrase from the sources, intellectual shrapnel.
Intellectual shrapnel really is the perfect descriptor here. What makes it shrapnel is its specific mechanism. Dylan doesn't present an abstract proposition, lay out a thesis, and calmly explain it to you over 5 minutes.
Right, no PowerPoint presentation here.
No, not at all. He stages a verbal collision. He takes a concrete, often bizarre image and throws it violently against a profound moral inference. And here is the genius of it. He forces you, the listener, to bridge the gap.
Oh, I saw.
Yeah, he doesn't do the work for you. You have to do the interpretive labor to connect the image to the meaning.
Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy, because when I read about this idea of intellectual shrapnel, it instantly made me think of the modern internet's fragment culture.
Oh, absolutely.
It's almost like Dylan invented the ultimate viral tweet or like TikTok sound decades early. These are highly compressed, repeatable phrases that can be ripped completely out of their original context, and people use them to signal their own identity.
That's a very sharp connection. Think about how we communicate now, right?
Mm.
In our current media environment, short-form language travels exponentially faster than sustained, nuanced argument.
Yeah, sadly.
Right. Fragments carry more public weight than essays, and Dylan was writing in units that behave exactly like that. The rhetoric matches a world where compressed speech circulates widely, gets detached from its source, and is constantly recontextualized to fit whatever point the user wants to make. It's portable ammunition.
Portable ammunition. Wow. Which leads into exactly what the song attacks first, I think. Because the way these aphorisms operate, rapidly scaling from private, intimate fears to massive public critique, it brings us face to face with the ambient, inescapable persuasion of consumer culture.
Yes,
The
definitely.
song famously talks about advertising signs that con you.
Right, and Dylan saw consumerism not just as an economic transaction, but as a deeply psychological one.
Mhm.
Advertising, in this framework, doesn't just sell you a refrigerator or a car.
Right.
It sells you a fantasy of being exceptional, of standing out, while simultaneously producing mass conformity. The analytical texts define this specific mechanism as manufactured insufficiency.
Manufactured insufficiency. That is such a powerful phrase. It's the act of making people feel like they are fundamentally lacking something and then conveniently offering a purchasable fix.
Exactly. Let's break down the mechanism. First, the system must produce the dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
You can't sell a solution to someone who is perfectly content.
Yeah, they wouldn't buy anything.
Exactly. So the environment is designed to make you feel inadequate. Maybe your clothes are outdated, your productivity is too low, or your lifestyle just isn't optimized. Once that insufficiency is manufactured, the system offers an object, a lifestyle brand, or an image as the remedy.
Wow.
And this is exactly where those modern policy reports bridge the gap from 1965 to today.
Yes, this is where it gets incredibly real for anyone listening.
Yeah, because if you look at the OECD and FTC documents regarding the modern digital economy, Dylan's broadcast-era critique maps perfectly onto today's digital advertising landscape, but like on steroids.
Totally.
We're talking about highly targeted ads tied to your personal data, real-time trading of your behavioral profile, and what economists call zero-price platform services.
Okay, zero-price platform services. Let's make sure we're totally clear on that because it sounds like jargon. That's the classic, if you aren't paying for the product, you are the product, right?
Exactly that.
You use your favorite social media app for free, zero price. But the hidden cost is that the platform is extracting your data to build a psychological profile.
Precisely. And that profile is used to target you with exact algorithmic precision, finding your personal vulnerabilities, your specific insufficiencies, and auctioning that access off to advertisers in milliseconds.
It's just wild to think about.
It is, and the FTC constantly emphasizes that online advertising must remain subject to truth in advertising standards precisely because credibility is so central to this medium, yet so incredibly vulnerable. Dylan was mapping out a culture where persuasion isn't just a billboard you drive past. It becomes ambient and inescapable.
Right.
It's in your pocket, in your living room, constantly tracking your habits.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, though.
Go for it.
I want to push back on the sheer bleakness of this vision. Isn't this just a really cynical 1960s anti-capitalist view? Because, I mean, advertising isn't all brainwashing. It genuinely gives us useful information about things we need. And to your point about zero-price services, advertising literally funds the free internet we use every day to connect with people, learn things, and even do deep dives like this one. So is all market communication inherently manipulative, or is Dylan just being overly dramatic for poetic effect?
That is a crucial pushback, and the analytical texts absolutely acknowledge it. Market communication isn't inherently evil. It coordinates global economies, it matches supply with demand, and it provides necessary information.
Right.
The deeper point the song makes isn't that buying a pair of shoes is a moral failing. It's an argument about scale and saturation. It's about what happens to the human psyche when persuasion becomes the absolute default language of social life.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, when your identity itself is addressed as a market problem, people are trained to relate to themselves as a sellable project.
Wow. Relating to yourself as a sellable project. That is literally the definition of the personal brand, isn't it? We are constantly curating our lives for an audience, trying to optimize our own market value.
Exactly. And the song argues that this commodification doesn't stop at the personal brand, it extends into what we consider sacred.
Oh, interesting.
The texts explore how sacred symbols, deeply held beliefs, and moral language are cheapened and turned into nothing more than branding layers. There are actually 3 specific mechanisms of sacralization that happen here.
Okay, what's the first one?
First is by commodity, where a sacred symbol is literally turned into a purchasable sign. Think of a revolutionary slogan printed on a $50 t-shirt.
Right, the rebellion itself become a product you can buy at the mall. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
What's the second mechanism?
The second is by authority. This is where leaders, corporations, or politicians borrow the language of the sacred or the highly moral to fortify their own status. They wrap themselves in righteous rhetoric to shield themselves from criticism.
Classic political move.
Exactly. And the third is by performance.
Performance, like logging onto a platform to display your outrage or your piety simply as an identity marker.
Yes. It's not about a deeply held, disciplined commitment to a cause. It's about making sure your audience knows you are on the right side.
Wow. Yeah.
The song's bleakest insight here is that desecration doesn't usually happen through open, violent hostility toward the sacred. It happens through routine instrumental use. You cheapen the truth by using it just to sell a car or win an argument or get a click.
So if everything from our personal identity to our most sacred beliefs is just being commodified and performed for an audience, what does that mean for the people actually running the show?
That's the logical next step.
Right, which transitions us directly into how the song strips away the costumes of authority. The analysis calls this naked power.
Power, in Dylan's framework, isn't just physical force or the ability to pass laws. It is heavily reliant on costume, ritual, and language. What Dylan does in this song is strip away that political prestige to show it as a highly fragile performance.
Like the emperor has no clothes.
Exactly. Rank, authority, the podium, the suit, they are exposed as contingent. They only command respect as long as the audience agrees to believe the performance.
That feels so incredibly relevant to our current era of celebrity politics and, the permanent campaign.
Sure.
The gap between the solemnity of a political office and the reality of the person holding it has never been more visible to the public. We see the backstage machinations in real time now.
And intimately tied to that performance of power is the performance of morality. The song offers a vicious critique of fake morals and social policing.
Oh, this is a big one.
Dylan completely rejects moral theater, which is an environment where outrage is performed primarily as a status symbol rather than a genuine pursuit of justice.
And we see the exact mechanisms of this online every single day. The texts call it the scandal economy and selective scrutiny.
Let's look at how that mechanism works. Publics, whether we're talking about local communities or massive online networks, often target highly visible symbolic violations. Someone says the wrong word, wears the wrong thing, or breaks a minor taboo.
Right, the pile-in effect.
Exactly. The community hyper-focuses on that while completely ignoring massive, complex structural harms that are much harder to solve. Communities police behavior, obscenity, and respectability through their collective gaze and through ritual condemnation.
But not to actually fix the problem, right?
No, the goal isn't to heal the community or achieve genuine ethical justice. The goal is to distribute stigma in socially or politically useful ways. It's about establishing who is in and who is out.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, but also where I have to ask a genuinely challenging question. Because if we take this line of thinking to its absolute logical conclusion, if we treat every office, every institution, and every public moral stance as just a phony theatrical performance or a cynical power grab, don't we risk sliding into total nihilism?
That is the danger, yes.
Right. Like, how do we possibly hold on to shared democratic institutions if we don't allow them even a little bit of reverence? If we tear it all down as fake, aren't we just left with nothing?
That is the exact danger the analysis highlights as a counter-argument. If you strip away all reverence, if you refuse to believe in anything, shared institutions become nearly impossible to defend.
Yeah, society would just collapse.
And a healthy, functioning society does require institutions that people can inhabit without total, corrosive cynicism. But the song's challenge remains legitimate respect cannot rest on costume alone.
It has to be earned.
Exactly. If authority demands obedience but completely sheds accountability, then demystifying it isn't nihilism, it is a necessary democratic act. The constant balancing act of modern life is finding that razor-thin line between necessary critical scrutiny and destructive, paralyzing nihilism.
Which brings us to a really difficult crossroads. Once you wake up and realize that the institutions and the moral outrage cycles are largely just theater, you are left with a stark choice. Do you surrender your judgment to a group just to feel safe, or do you stand entirely alone?
That choice is the existential core of the song. Let's look at the first option, surrendering to the group. The texts explore this under the theme of party platforms and idols. This is a deep dive into how people are recruited into collective positions.
And just to remind you listening, we are looking at this impartially. This applies to all networked publics. It applies to fandoms, ideological subcultures, left-wing factions, right-wing factions, anyone who forms a group online or in real life.
Absolutely. It is a fundamental human psychological phenomenon. The song critiques dogmatism and the concept of borrowed certainty.
Borrowed certainty.
Yes. Modern life is deeply, fundamentally anxious. The sheer volume of information and choices is overwhelming. One of the easiest ways to relieve that anxiety is to adopt ready-made answers, designated heroes, and predefined enemies provided by a group.
It sounds almost like moral outsourcing.
Oh, that's good.
Think about it like outsourcing your brain's hard drive to the cloud. Joining these rigid factions is emotionally incredibly efficient. You don't have to do the heavy lifting of critical thinking. You don't have to weigh complex evidence. You just download the group's opinion.
All right.
But the trade-off is that your intellect becomes incredibly brittle. Because once you outsource your morality to the cloud, if you ever disagree with the group, it's no longer just a healthy debate. It is a threat to your entire identity and your social survival.
Moral outsourcing is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. You delegate your judgment to the approved authority so you don't have to carry the weight of uncertainty. But the alternative the song presents is equally daunting. That's the theme of Alone You Stand.
Right, the speaker in the song is the one who sees through the illusion. They see the advertising cons. They see the naked power. They see the moral theater. But the cost of that clarity is total, crushing isolation.
The analytical texts use a specific sociological term for this, disembedding. It refers to the loss of traditional anchors. Let's make that concrete. In the modern world, the individual is constantly observed, constantly addressed by marketers and politicians, and constantly pressured by social expectations.
Yeah, we're all hyper-connected.
You might have 5,000 followers or connections, so you are hyper-visible. But you aren't securely held by any stable, comforting order. You don't belong to a cohesive community that unconditionally has your back. The speaker in the song gains intellectual independence from these coercive systems, but they pay for it with the loss of comfort and community. It's a state of pure existential endurance.
So we've tracked the psychological journey the song takes us on, from ambient advertising making us feel insufficient, to hollow authority demanding our respect, from the seduction of outsourcing our brains to groupthink, to the sheer isolation of seeing it all clearly.
It's a heavy journey.
It really is. But now I want to zoom out. Let's look at the massive technological machinery that accelerates everything Dylan described. Because the historical release notes show this song has a massive, enduring afterlife.
It really does. If you look at the official Dylan site, this song is constantly re-entering circulation. You see live versions heavily featured on Before the Flood, Bob Dylan at Budokan, the Bootleg Series Volume 6, the 1974 live recordings.
He keeps coming back to it.
He keeps returning to it decade after decade. It adapts to entirely new eras because it acts as a highly accurate pressure map for algorithmic culture.
But just to be clear, Dylan wasn't like a wizard or a tech prophet who magically predicted the algorithm in 1965, right?
No, not a prophet in the technical sense. He didn't foresee recommender systems, targeted cookies, or generative AI. What he possessed was a profound recognition of durable human patterns and the continuity of incentive.
Human nature doesn't change.
Exactly. The technologies change. We go from print to radio to television to the smartphone. But the systems still reward the exact same things. Attention capture, emotional activation, symbolic identification, and flattening complex ambiguity into simplistic, sellable certainty.
And this ties directly back to those modern reports from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Exactly. The song's core themes of information disorder and the rapid erosion of trust perfectly parallel current NIST warnings. They are issuing reports right now about how generative AI can facilitate mass misinformation and erode public trust in valid, objective evidence.
Which is terrifying.
It is. The digital platforms of today benefit from visibility and engagement in the exact same way that broadcast media did in the 60s. But the sheer speed, the scale, and the micro-targeting are entirely unprecedented.
So what does this all mean for us today? If the song's method is compression, if Dylan is intentionally forcing the listener to experience information overload as an artistic form, is he essentially giving us the 1965 acoustic equivalent of doom scrolling?
Yes. It is absolutely an acoustic precursor to doom scrolling.
But if so, how does seeing the machinery actually help us survive it?
Well, he drops you right into the flood of competing images, false claims, and societal noise. But how does it help? By offering diagnosis over complacency. The song doesn't give you a simple feel-good cure, but it gives you a discipline of reading the world.
A discipline of reading the world.
Yes. It trains your mind to ask specific questions. Who benefits from this framing? What incentives are structuring the speech? What forms of manipulation and falseness have we simply accepted as normal? It gives you a vocabulary to understand your own exploitation.
I love that. Let's bring this all together. It's All Right Ma, I Only Bleeding is not just a dusty protest song about the 1960s. It is a rigorous, structural critique of a world where persuasion is inescapable, where moral language is inflated to the point of bursting, and where certainty is packaged and sold as a commodity.
It accurately maps the vulnerabilities of the human mind when placed under the immense pressure of modern media.
So, to you listening, the next time you feel that familiar bone-deep exhaustion from a hyper-targeted ad that knows you a little too well, or you watch a performative outrage cycle spin up online over a minor symbolic offense, or you feel the suffocating pressure of a political echo chamber demanding your loyalty. Wait, maybe rephrase that. When you feel that pressure, remember, you aren't alone. You are experiencing the exact state of exposed consciousness that Bob Dylan mapped out 6 decades ago.
The machine has gotten exponentially faster, but the human wiring it exploits is exactly the same.
Yeah, which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. We started by talking about unfolding a blueprint from 1965 and realizing it's a map of our current digital reality. If a single, dense acoustic song could so accurately map out the psychological vulnerabilities that digital platforms and algorithms would eventually exploit, well, what kind of radical new art form will it take to help the next generation survive the coming era of AI-generated reality? Is music still capable of being that kind of weapon? Or will the next great structural critique have to come from inside the machine itself?
That is the big question we have to leave you with.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.